Are you happy with the state of our country? I'm not. I'm Rob Richardson, engineer, political activist, and advocate for change. I've spent the last 2 decades fighting for the average person. Disruption is not a compromise. Let's shake things up a bit, challenge the status quo, and focus on what's really important to you. Welcome to Disruption. Welcome to Disruption, everybody. I'm Rob Richardson. I am here with my co-host Clement. Clement, how you doing, brother?
Hey, pretty good. How are you?
Good. It's good to be back. You know, it's we used to do this over radio, and it's now good to share with listeners all across the country. I want everybody to know what Disruption's about. Disruption's about those who want to take on the system, those who still believe and want to fight for America, but know that we need to stand up, fight, and resist to do that. I believe that innovation and disruption only happen when people stand up, they fight, and they make their voices heard. So this is an invitation for others to join us, and we want to make sure your voice is heard because we know that mainstream media doesn't represent very well. So we want to get right to it, and we want to make sure that we challenge the status quo in everything we do and everything we say on this show. So this show is actually about a topic you might not think has a lot of parallels, but they really do when you're really thinking about it. So the name of this and the title of this show, Clement, is Surviving Donald Trump and R. Kelly. So, and I know people saying, what in the world do the two have to do with each other? But if you think about it at first glance, they actually have a lot in common, though it may not seem like it. They both have credible accounts of sexual misconduct against them. They both have a pretty limited vocabulary. And they also have a pretty wide following with both of these people, I guess, and one happens to be the president, which is amazing. But anyway, they both have a lot in common, and their followers certainly have a lot in common. And I was struck, Clement, watching that Surviving R. Kelly documentary, which I didn't want to do, frankly, because I just wasn't going to do it. But I guess social media pressure got the best of me, and I ended up watching a few episodes of it, and I was struck with a lot of things, but I immediately thought about the parallels between R. Kelly and Donald Trump. And while many may not think about it, they really do have a lot in common. And I want to go over some of these things because there's so many. And the first I want to go over is that, you know, the fact is they have a lot of supporters that can't be denied. Despite all the things that we know about both men, they have very strong support in this country. And their defenders at this point, and for a very long time, frankly, have no plausible deniability. They are both clearly guilty of things that no one should be proud of and no one should be following. For R. Kelly, it's a little simpler because it's fresher for us, right? We have a man that's had credible allegations, and he is a child molester, right? He doesn't deny that he had a relationship with Aaliyah when she was 15. He was about 30. 15, right? He doesn't deny that, and there's no denying that they actually got married because that's proven and that's already out there. And there's also no denying that he likes teenage girls. I mean the documentary made that very clear. Like, why does a really really grown man, keep going back to a high school every year and bringing girls from high schools? I mean, I don't know what reason you have. I can't think of one. Maybe Clement.
It's not because he supports youth empowerment. I mean, that's not his reason. Yeah, maybe that should have been. He didn't. Hey, like youth empowerment. He'd go back to find high school girls, and they say R. Kelly would hang out at McDonald's all the time to do some more youth empowerment. That was maybe he should have been his lawyer, but that wasn't the reason he actually used. That, and plus he was obviously on trial for sexual misconduct for, urinating on an underage woman. And even though he got found not guilty, I mean, most people, it was an ongoing almost joke. It was so much so it became popular culture. The Chappelle Show made a joke about it. But the fact is, lots of people saw that tape. Everyone knew that was R. Kelly in the tape. I haven't seen the tape. I don't want to see a tape of R. Kelly peeing on anybody. I have to just believe what people tell me. But the fact is, everyone knew that was R. Kelly and couldn't deny it. With Donald Trump, there's a lot of things we can say that we know for sure. There are things that I believe that are not in doubt with Donald Trump, and we can go through them. But let's start with one. The fact is he's a racist. He's been a racist for a very long time. He was discriminated against. No, he was discriminating against African Americans being able to rent to his development and had to be sued and forced to let African Americans into his development. A long time ago, we're talking 20, 30 years ago, he attacked the Central five African American men, saying that they needed to go to jail, saying that they needed to have the death penalty. And they weren't guilty, and they were found not guilty, but he still stands by that. Right when he announces his presidency, Clement, he walks off and says Mexicans are rapists, so that's why we got to stop people from coming into our country. We know that when hate groups and the KKK during Charlottesville, we can go back to that. And when that happened, a normal president, a moral president, a president with some social consciousness that cares about more than a few people or just his base or just one color or one race, this would have been easy for any other president, Republican or Democrat. For some reason, it was hard for him, and he had to say that people on the KKK are both fine people when only one side in that incident killed someone. I don't understand that response, but that to me is really clear. But yet, when you hear Trump defenders of that, they can come up with justifications for why he had that position. And of course, we know others, but there's also no denying other things with Russia collusion, but I'll talk more about that. But what do you think is the reason for some of these defenders just to go even harder when the evidence seems clearer?
That's the million-dollar question. What's it going to take? Whether it be the Trump's defenders, whether it be R. Kelly's defenders, whether it be Bill Cosby's defenders, there's all kinds of academic research. I mean, you get real intellectual about it, but we're also trying to figure that out. If we knew, I think we hopefully would have some different political outcomes.
Yeah.
But what's it going to take for people to? I mean, also another topic is climate change. What's it going to take for people to actually recognize evidence, facts, and change their minds? I mean, because it's okay if people have opinions that are based off of falsehoods. But then once you are presented with a new perspective, that's combined with facts and evidence and data, a lot of people, myself included, like to think that we would be reasonable enough to change our minds.
Right.
So what's it going to take for the true believers? We've got a straight up cult going on over here up in the White House and with different, whether it be R. Kelly again, Bill Cosby, et cetera. So, if we knew, I think I'd be going, all over the place to share. But
right. I mean, it goes to another problem, another parallel we can find between the R. Kelly situation as well as Trump. Social media and what that is doing. You were seeing. So there was a report that there was a website set up by R. Kelly sympathizers, or maybe it was R. Kelly, who knows? But a website was set up called Surviving Lies, and it was R. Kelly, of course, going after his accusers and his victims, and impugning their character, saying all types of things about him. We've seen this, right? We've seen this from Donald Trump too, as well, when he was accused by about, I think it was about at least 20 women of sexual assault, sexual misconduct. And the first thing that's done by him, the first thing that's done by his supporters is to attack those accusers. Same thing was done here. Actually, Facebook pulled down the site because they said that it violated their terms. But Clement, this brings up something interesting, and it was something I heard Dr. Michael Eric Dyson said before. The social media and all of its benefits, and it's benefiting us in this show, but it also has a dark side, right? It has a dark side, the fact that it pre-amplifies pre-existing conditions. It pre-amplifies if you have a pre-existing condition to be a misogynist, now you have a bunch of people that can reinforce your crazy beliefs because Facebook and social media feeds you more of what you want to hear. It's not facts. So you have people out here from R. Kelly defenders to Trump supporters. They have justification in all of their craziness because someone can come with something off the internet. That must be facts. Don't listen to that because this is the fact. And, so we in the age of social media, it's allowed us to I think, be more connected, but somehow be more disconnected and have less information and be less informed. So we've seen social media, and we've seen the defenders of these folks go after the accusers. Donald Trump does it, his supporters do it, and R. Kelly's folks do it. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Again, I mean, people getting real academic about social media and what it's done to our culture, our community. Absolutely, 100%. You can see, where social media allows people to amplify and get into their echo chamber bubble, and it's also a degree of like analogy is like when you go on these sites that do reviews, whether it be movies or you go on Amazon and you want to find out, you want to buy a watch or something, and you want to get a review on a watch. The only people that are going to be going on those sites to do reviews are the people that feel really strongly, right?
Correct.
But the people that kind of just feel indifferent or apathetic, I mean, they're probably just not going to take the time and not going to bother to share their opinion. So when it comes to politics or music or whatever, only the people that feel really strongly are going to be you are going to be represented probably on your social media feed. So probably the vast majority of people, don't really care all that much.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of getting a biased and not representative view of truly what people feel and believe. But unfortunately, that's the aspect of social media that comes with the territory.
But you made a really important point that I think we need to talk about as we think about social media, and I think about this documentary. You and I discussed offline, like, why did it take a documentary for people to understand that R. Kelly is a predator? That's been clear for a long time. I would say is you just kind of hit on it. People are apathetic. They knew about it. They just ignored it because they had a relationship with his music. They said he makes good music, and they were willing to undervalue everything else or not pay attention to it. And it's the same thing that you could see going on with Trump. The fact is, I believe that most of his supporters know that he is a corrupt person. They know some of this stuff is true. I believe that they just don't count it as much, don't listen to it as much because they have a relationship with what he's doing. They like the fact that as they see it, he's attacking these elite institutions. As they see it, he's going after liberals. As they see it, he is going after people that are hurting them. And so I'm willing to ignore this other stuff because he's doing some things that I like.
I mean, it's also about, when you say what's it going to take, and even in the face of like video evidence, there's still denials. But there are a lot of people, in the wake of the airing of the documentary that are now coming forward to apologize and disassociate themselves. I mean, I saw on maybe Twitter or maybe some other account, but that John Legend was, condemning R. Kelly and saying that, he didn't know at the time. There's this comic, I don't know, have you heard this dude, Hari Kondabolu?
No.
He's a good comedian and political commentator, I think, and people should check him out if you don't already know him. Hari Kondabolu, but he tweeted out a couple days ago. He goes, "I apologize for working with R. Kelly and not being more informed about what he was accused of. ... Even though it was constantly in the news and I have access to Google." And that's basically everyone who's apologizing.
Yep.
I mean, this is like, we knew this,
yes.
right? And I mean, another analogy I can kind of relate this to is when Ray Rice and his allegations of sexual assault came out. The NFL was really, quick to dismiss it or basically, do some sham investigation, and then only when confronted with, they didn't go try very hard to get this video evidence, but when like TMC circulated the footage, and there was all this outcry, and only then were people like, oh yeah, this is unacceptable, and only then did he actually face any discipline. So it's like, what's it going to take? So like for some people, it's like video evidence, which is undeniable. But then for others, it's like, okay, you just want to, easily just be willfully ignorant.
Yep.
And just want to, because a lot of this is motivated by dollars. I mean, hey, It's good for my bank account to continue working with R. Kelly. His reputation is still such that you can make a good dollar off him, and he's still popular.
And coming back to the Trump analogy, all of that is motivated by power because Republicans aren't willing to step. They're not willing to step forward because they're scared of what's going to happen to them if they challenge something. They know they know it's clearly wrong. Every Republican you've seen stand up to Trump is not running for re-election. They are scared that if they step up, and they have good reason at least to have that fear, if they step up, they come out of line, he will go after them, they will lose a primary, and they will lose their power. But you have to ask yourself, and something I have to ask every Republican that still defends Trump, is power more important than principle? Is power more important than the Constitution? Is power more important than showing an example of moral authority from this office? Is power more important than how you want your girls, your wife to be treated? Because he is setting an example for the whole nation and really making us a laughing stock for this world. So if you look at what's going on here, just like you mentioned, what's going on with Trump, what's happening with R. Kelly, it wasn't one person that failed. It wasn't 10 people that failed. It was a collective systemic failure. There were many black artists that ignored what was going on. I'm sure there were white artists as well. And there are many in the black community that ignored what was happening with R. Kelly. Those who were close to the situation, you made the point. Why? It's really simple, because money. He was lining lots of people's pockets. They looked the other way because he made great music, and they didn't want to know the truth. They didn't want to seek it. And there are people that are making the same claims with Trump, though it's harder to make those claims since every single day we're presented with more and more facts of not only his moral authority, but he is really corrupt and how close he's been to Russia. So on both cases, I think you're seeing this systemic failure happen.
I know we got to move on to.
No, we don't.
One hypothetical that I wonder is, would Democrats have the backbone to call out, if the shoe was on the other foot, if we had someone in the Oval Office who had dictatorial fascist tendencies, but was using those tendencies to implement progressive policies and was going about it, declaring a national emergency to implement Medicare for all, or declaring a national emergency to enact reparations. Would the Democrats, have the backbone to stand up and be like, this is wrong, Constitution doesn't allow for this, this is not who we are, right? This is not what this nation was founded upon. I wonder.
I think so.
That'd be a tough.
I'm going to say yes. Here's why. Here's why I'm going to say yes, because I know the history of the Democratic Party. It's one that we have a little bit of some example of this with FDR, right? Remember when FDR made the threat to pack the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court was overturning progressive decisions? I kind of like the strategy. At least it forced them to do some things and think about things. But here's the thing: lots of Democrats, they were conservative Democrats, started to buckle, and he lost them. That's when he started losing the control of the Senate, and then they made him back down from that decision. That was Democrats.
Well, one thing to remember about FDR, you bring that up example, is he was the president who enacted Japanese internment.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is the example that's the lesson that we should be drawn from when you want to otherize, a group of people and say that they're the big bad enemy and stoke fear. That was an example when the entire country did not stand up.
No, that's true.
Well, I can't say the entire country, but those in office, the majority of those in office did not stand up to fight back.
Neither Democrat or Republicans
against that particular piece of legislation. So that's why I wonder. I mean, it's power. What's that saying? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. And this is something that you always have to guard against.
Well, I think it's why you have different parties too. My hope would be somebody would stand up. I saw something on Twitter that said for all these Republicans that are cheering Trump about
using the powers of using these emergency powers and tell him to do it, go forward. They should remember something. There's going to be a Democratic president one day too. And if this is okay now, it's going to be okay then. You're expanding this power in a way that you may not like when a Democrat becomes president. But this is what I think, Clement. I think that Republicans don't believe we will have the gumption to ever do anything like this, so they're not worried about it. They don't think we're going to have a president that's going to be as responsive as Trump has been. So they're not worried about it. Right now, I think they see him as the useful idiot he is. They're going to ride him out for as long as they can because no matter what, even if he gets impeached or something, think about what he's accomplished for them. 2 Supreme Court justices, a horrible tax law that just took basically a lot of money out of the Treasury, gave $1 trillion back to corporations so they can not so they can hire more workers, not so they can boost the economy. None of that happened. So they can give more money to themselves and take even more money out of the economy and do less investment. That's a lot. And they just got rid of all these regulations faster than almost anyone else ever has in a matter of 2 years. They've also confirmed more judges on the lower level than we've ever seen in 2 years. So from their point of view, it's looking really good. And they're going to keep doing it as long as they can and do it to as many people as they can as long as it works. Because right now for them, it's working. Despite losing some seats this year, they still have the Senate. And they're still able to move judicial appointments forward.
Yeah, I actually been saying after Kavanaugh got confirmed, I think that Trump became just as consequential as President Obama did in his 8-year term because, like you said, two Supreme Court justices, that's what, President Obama had. He's appointed, he's on track to appoint way more federal judges than Obama had at this time during his, during his term. And then the tax cut. So, I mean, he could walk away today and be just as impactful, as any other president probably in certainly in modern history. I mean, he's just done that much damage already.
He has. So, and that's why his popularity, just like R. Kelly's popularity, is increasing with his supporters. His you would think, based upon the Lifetime documentary series, that his money and sales would be going down. It's going up. Everyone thought after Donald Trump and after everyone heard Donald Trump in those infamous now Hollywood access tapes brag about sexually assaulting women, brag about it, that he would just be finished. And instead, his support solidified and he won the election. Then everyone thought after Charlottesville, after he said those statements, that was going to come back, but he still continues to be popular. Then everyone thought after a lot of credible allegations and after many indictments with this Russia collusion and seeing all this evidence that he would lose in popularity, he would go down. And yes, if you look at polling, which, I don't believe hardly any polling, but that's neither here nor there. But if you look at polling, it shows that Donald Trump is highly unpopular, yet he's still able to keep the Senate. He's still able to win some races across the country. And when it comes down to it, when you look at what happened in 2018, yes, there was a blue wave. It was also met by a red wave, and Republican voters did not stay at home. They were still enthusiastic. They were still engaged. And in places where, like Ohio, where you might not have as a friendly a territory or maybe a moderate territory, it wasn't guaranteed that it was going to Democrats. As we know, Ohio, including its congressional races, all went Republican, except for the Senate race with Sherrod Brown, which was actually a lot closer than anyone thought it would be. So we cannot say that this is going away, that Trumpism is going to be something that's short term. It's something that's going to have to be dealt with for a long period of time, and it's not going away. Even if he resigns, everything he represents is not going away, because the Republicans are, if they're one thing, they are strategic, and they are ruthlessly strategic, and they're going to take this strategy and figure out what they can do with it until it can be shown that it doesn't work anymore. And so the fact is, you would think all this evidence makes these characters less popular. It doesn't. It seems to make them. It seems to with their base and people that participate, it makes them more engaged. And guess what? a motivated minority in this country can rule, particularly if people are apathetic and not involved. So that's what worries me about this, because there is tape. There's just as convincing as tape of evidence out there with Donald Trump as there is with R. Kelly. And as we wrap up this R. Kelly and Donald Trump comparison, I think about that documentary again, and the one part of it that really kind of just struck a chord with me was when there was an interview with R. Kelly some years back, and the reporter asked him what I think is a really simple question. Clement, do you date teenage girls? And he looks back, and he has a pause. He's like, what do you mean by teenage? Like 19, like, that's not a hard question, right? I mean, he didn't ask, oh, what's the theory of relativity? Can you explain that to me? So you had to think and process in your mind. If someone asked me, do you like teenage girls? My answer would be very simple. No. Why would I like teenage girls or ever date teenage girls? That's absolutely wrong, and I would never do that. Of course not. But he had to think about his answer, and he sounded like he wanted to talk about it and justify his reasons for doing what he did. And if you listen to Trump and his answers with Russia, it's the same thing. It's not a hard question. Did you work with Russia to influence the election? And you can't get a straight answer for this. It's not hard. It's either a yes or no. Did you fire James Comey because of the Russian investigation? It's yes, no. It's not hard. It really isn't. If you didn't do it, it doesn't require a bunch of different explanations that change over time. I don't know. I don't get it. That's my thought. That's my wrap up. When I think about how we're going to survive R. Kelly and how we're going to survive Donald Trump, we're going to survive them by making sure that those who understand what's going on inform others and keep presenting it over and over and over again. Because eventually, after a while, I believe enough of the public are going to push back, just like they did with R. Kelly, just like they started to with the Me Too movement. If we can thank Donald Trump for something, it is this, is that he has helped change the conversation when it comes to sexual harassment about what's never been acceptable, but it was always accepted. Whether we say it or not, sexual harassment was accepted by many, and it was a culture that we let go, and it's now coming to light. It's not perfect in its implementation, the Me Too movement, but it's a necessary one that needs to keep pushing forward. And we can thank Donald Trump for that, and we can thank Donald Trump for the strong progressive voices that are coming out now. So, as we figure out how to survive R. Kelly and Donald Trump, we'll move forward. But I want to talk more about our president and some more of his foolishness, too, as he seeks to distract from the Russia investigation, as he seeks to distract from all of his failures. He has to figure out a way to continuously engage his base, because it's not about running this country. So this week, of course, we know he addressed the nation in what's now a national crisis at the border, and why he had to address the nation right now, and why he might have to use emergency powers in order to build his wall he's been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years. Now, first of all, I don't understand, Clement, how this is all of a sudden an emergency. Now, if my math is correct, Republicans have been in office for 2 years, right? Is that right? They've been in office for 2 years. He's had full control of the government, had plenty of chances to fully fund his wall, and, by the way, has received about $21 billion in border security funding. So he's actually gotten all this, but he is using this moment, from my perspective, from my mind, to figure out how to get his base riled up, because he knows what's happening, what's coming with the Democrats in power in the House. He knows the investigations are going to see the light of day. He knows that the Mueller investigation is coming to a conclusion, and it's not what he wants. So he needs to figure out a way to get his base engaged, riled up, so he can have more support, and he can get them constantly distracted. He can keep government constantly divided. So in the midst of confusion, no one can understand what's going on. That's what I see happening. What do you think?
Yeah, all of that. These days, who knows, right? But he's also done a masterful job at dictating what's in the news and what people are talking about.
Yeah, he has, unfortunately.
And with a lot of other things that have happened, like Michael Cohen, I saw like this past week, agreed to give public testimony. Other indictments that have come down from the Mueller investigation and the special counsel. Were it not for Donald Trump's, coup this past week when he, forced the networks to give him the airtime, we'd be talking about how much trouble, he's in.
Yep. No question.
And so he's still in a world of trouble. That obviously hasn't changed, but we're still just talking about another chaotic, issue. But just this time, he's the one that is, framing it, dictating it. And unfortunately, that is kind of getting lost because we're just kind of following the shiny object here. So
he knows what he's doing when it comes to framing the narrative in the media. That's certainly true.
Yeah. So with all this nonsense, it is nonsense. It's there's not a national emergency.
It's not a national emergency.
No. But we're talking about what he wants us to talk about. We're reacting to him as opposed to other external, objective, verifiable.
And the media is complicit.
References.
The media is complicit in this, from my perspective. When you look at 2014, Obama wanted to do a primetime address to the nation, addressing immigration, but they told him it wasn't of national importance, so they didn't allow him to have primetime address. They allowed this president that they know and has a long demonstrated record of not only spinning but completely lying, fabricating, and just making things up from day to day in order to serve his interests. They put him on TV for something that's clearly not a national emergency, but they did it anyway. And I think it's because, the media loves Trump in this way because people will watch. They want to see still if he's going to do something crazy, because I think he is crazy. And people are entertained. He is good at entertaining people. He is horrible at legislating, but entertainment is what media cares about. It gets them more clicks. It gets them more viewership. Obama didn't have that same draw because you're like, he's just a president that's just trying to run the country. Who cares about that anymore? So I do think the media is complicit in this from what I see. So and it's why mediums like this are so important, because the media, in my mind, has been compromised, whether they realize it or not. So when we look at that, we need to see why we need to disrupt more. And I think as we talk about disruption, I want to move to the disruptor of the week, and it is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's been the disruptor of the year, really. Clement, what's interesting to me is that not only does she frame the narrative well, she's not afraid. She speaks like a normal person, and the right has gone crazy over her. Like, I've never seen anybody. I thought Obama drove them crazy. I think she drives them way crazier than Obama ever did. I mean, anything she does gets scrutinized. And keep this in mind. How long has she been serving in office? Like a week? You would think she's been president of the United States or something. They are so scared of her, and I think they're so scared of the ideas the ideas that she's presenting, and the fact that she is, I think, convincing in how she frames the argument, that they have to figure out how to discredit her from the very beginning. But she's done a masterful job of pushing back and not allowing them to do that. But the right doesn't surprise me, and Fox doesn't surprise me that they come out with stories of her dancing, and that's, it's a scandal. She dances. Okay. That doesn't surprise me. What surprises me, and I guess it shouldn't surprise me, Clement, is that the Democrats are participating in this. Democrats are saying, she's just a shiny new object that needs to go away. I think former Senator Claire McCaskill said that. She's a shiny new object who beat a really good congressman, so that's why everybody's paying attention to her. And you have people saying that, she needs to learn her place. She needs to get in line. Politico had an article saying we need to rein her in, and we need to figure out how to do that. When I think it should be the opposite. The fact is she has 2.2 million followers on Twitter, as much as any presidential candidate has right now already. What she's showing is that when you speak from passion, you speak from conviction, people will follow you. And I think they need to be finding ways to actually put her voice and move her voice forward, not trying to figure out how to keep her in line, how to make sure that she follows the rules, that these old rules that they have in place. They also got upset with her because she sought a leadership position within the House in order to do more. And I'm thinking they should do that because no one's listening to you. People are tired of how things are working. And you know what? Their frustration is part of the reason why we have Donald Trump, because some of them sat out of this election. Some of them sat out of the 2016 election because they didn't believe in the messenger. They didn't believe in the Democratic Party. She is igniting belief in people that we need to be engaged, and they need to be fostering her voice. That's what I think. So the fact that she's making some people uncomfortable, I think it's her job, because people should be uncomfortable with the state of politics in this country.
Yeah, she's a breath of fresh air. I can't wait to see more of what she does. But yeah, she's awesome. I actually was thinking about why we haven't seen someone like her until now, because I mean, we all know a lot of people who, when we're talking, we have the same critiques of, either the Republicans or Democrats or whoever's in office. And she's saying so many things that we've all been saying. And so now finally we have, someone who is of the millennial generation, of, a person of color, woman of color, and combining all of these things that we've been missing in our elected leaders, particularly at the federal level. Yep. It just kind of shows that how much they're scared of her, because rather than criticizing the points that she's making, they're and debating her on the merits, they're attacking her. And that's when you are in a weaker position, when you're making ad hominem attacks, right? Yep. And so whether it be the establishment that kind of lined up, and this happens, not just in politics, but other arenas too. But
sure.
Lining up
more so in politics.
But lining up behind who's paid their dues, who's most senior, that sort of dynamic. But particularly when it comes to the right, Fox News, the Republicans, and how they're just going after her for every little thing. I mean, when she was first running in a primary, nobody took her seriously. Nobody was covering her. And then now, now that she's the position that she's in, now they're going after her like, she's as potentially as consequential as she could potentially be. Yep. And it reminded me of this quote that Gandhi had, which goes, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Right. Yep. And so she's gone through, a lot of these stages. She's been ignored, she's been laughed at. Now they're fighting her, yep. And so hopefully that bodes well as far as galvanizing the grassroots, reasonable people, not necessarily left and right, but just reasonable people to hopefully move the ball forward on all the pressing challenges that face our communities and the country, whether it be climate change, healthcare, all these things that have just been, campaign finance reform, right? So can't wait.
Yeah, I'm actually struck about how she talks about issues, and you said it well, but she frames it normally, like people can understand it, and frames the argument, frames it from a moral perspective, doesn't get bogged down into facts and figures. And that's what the right tries to get around. That's what Democrats try to get around. Well, she got one fact wrong when it comes to how she described the military, and people don't care, right? Should you try to get facts right? Yes, but you shouldn't focus on facts and figures as much as you should focus on framing the issues and trying to make Democrats understand that, like, no one's going to care about a spreadsheet you put forward. Stop it. Like, they want to hear why you have these convictions. And when I saw her response to Donald Trump's address to the nation, and I saw Nancy Pelosi's response and Chuck Schumer's response, you can see why she is convincing. She speaks with passion. They were stiff in their response. They were speaking from talking points, not talking about how it really affects people. She talked directly about how it was affecting families, how separating families really was hurting people. She talked about people dying under custody because of what this president is doing, and that this is not who we are as Americans.
And you know what, too? There's a double standard, and there's a disingenuousness going on because, one, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she will actually own up to, whenever she, if she's quoted a figure wrong or, made a misstatement, she'll clarify. She'll actually apologize or retract, a statement. She's actually had a pretty good and refreshing track record, limited track record of doing that. But for all the people who have basically gone into all these, details and counterpoints, where were you when Paul Ryan was trying to sell us on this $1 trillion tax cut?
Exactly.
Where were you when Trump is getting up there and making all the statements and falsehoods that he's doing, right?
Like right now, sure.
Lindsey Graham, all of the misstatements that and falsehoods that have been spewed just across the board. So it is disingenuous to say that she doesn't know what she's talking about. That just because she got one thing wrong doesn't mean she doesn't know what she's talking about. So again, that just shows to me that you're only going after somebody if you actually fear that they could actually amount to something.
Yeah, I agree. And my message to her, not that she needs any advice, keep going, keep fighting, ignore these people. When you're a disruptor, you're going to make others uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable making others uncomfortable sometimes. And, it's the job of those in Congress, I think, to start acting like that versus acting like an insiders club. And it's the reason why people are frustrated with it, with how politics are going. And she is a breath of fresh air, and she needs to keep fighting. She needs to keep moving forward. I hope she keeps disrupting. Finally, as we always try to wrap up our series with a little bit of a lighter note, is Are You Serious? And as we've talked about at the very beginning, this whole show is about the culture currently in this country and what's happened and how Donald Trump has changed things for the worse, some for the better in terms of how people are being more engaged. But I want to specifically talk about R. Kelly, and particularly those who are defending R. Kelly, because I think we talked a lot about Donald Trump as well. But you can understand that this system is corrupt, that it's unjust, that it's racist at times, that it's been unfair to African Americans, to people of color, to the poor, to the disenfranchised. All that can be true. And R. Kelly is also guilty. R. Kelly is still a predator. Just because R. Kelly is black, just because R. Kelly's made great music for the black community, just because he might have been at your wedding in terms of hearing his music. He might have been at a graduation. He might have done a lot for the city of Chicago. He might have done a lot for African-American music. He might, and he is a musical genius. That does not excuse, nor should it allow you to ignore the horrible things he has done. And we shouldn't. Just because he's black and just because the system has been unfair, particularly the criminal justice system to African-Americans, doesn't mean that he's not guilty in this case. He is a very, very privileged African-American man. And just think about this for a minute. If he was any other man, with everything he's done, with the amount of teenagers he's gone after, he would be in jail. He is not in jail right now because he is R. Kelly, the man who's made great music. And this is the only reason he's not in jail. And when it comes to Donald Trump, people have to realize, too, that he is also a corrupt, racist, misogynist president. And that the evidence is really, really clear on that. That doesn't mean all his supporters are. What that means is we need to make sure we're not ignoring it because we might like what he's doing. That doesn't matter. The fact is he's still not fit to be president of the United States. R. Kelly should not be a free man. And you cannot hate Donald Trump but say you love R. Kelly, or vice versa, love Donald Trump and say you hate R. Kelly, because at the end of the day, I think they're the same person. They're the same people, and we should reject both points of view. I'm Rob Richardson. I'm glad you enjoyed Disruption. Clement, thank you for joining us. For all the listeners, I hope you stay tuned for the next episode.